He almost gave the dog away. 24 hours later, he understood that the dog had been the only thing standing between his son and something invisible and lethal. The Husky had always been Jada's dog. Storm had been a gift on Jada's 28th birthday. A 6-week-old Siberian Husky who had grown into 58 pounds of blue-eyed, wall-howling, bed-stealing devotion. When their son Miles arrived 3 years later, Storm had accepted him with an equanimity that surprised everyone. He let the newborn sleep near him. He waited at the nursery door without being asked. He was, in the word their neighbor used after babysitting twice, impressive. So when Storm started pushing Miles away from Jada, it came from nowhere and made no sense at all. The first time, Miles was 4 months old, wrapped in a white cotton blanket, being carried by Jada from the nursery to the kitchen. Storm came down the hallway and pressed his body against Jada's legs. Not hard, but insistent, like a dog trying to herd something. Jada stepped around him. He followed and pressed again. Their father, Kevin, said, "He probably wants attention. You've been in the nursery most of the day." Jada said maybe, but the way he did it was strange. The second time, Jada was on the couch feeding Miles. Storm got up from his bed across the room and came to stand directly in front of her. He pressed his muzzle against her arm, the one holding Miles, and pushed. Gently, but pushed. Jada said his name. He pressed again. Kevin was watching this time. He crossed the room and told Storm to go to his bed. Storm went. He stood at the edge of the bed and did not lie down. Kevin said, "That's twice." Jada said, 3 times. He did something similar yesterday when I was changing him. The third time happened during morning. Kevin was in the kitchen when he heard Jada's voice from the living room. Not alarmed, but firm. He came in to find Storm pressed between Jada and the couch, his full body a barrier, Miles in her arms crying on the other side. The dog was not growling. His eyes were not wide. He was blocking with a quiet determination that looked less like aggression and more like something that had made a decision. Kevin got a leash and put Storm in the backyard. He had been a maintenance technician for 11 years. He trusted what he could observe. What he observed was a large dog who had attempted 3 times in 3 days to separate a mother from an infant, and that was a pattern he had a professional framework for. He called the rescue organization that evening. He left a message. "If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one." That night, Jada developed a headache. She attributed it to stress. Miles had been up twice the previous night, and she was still in the early weeks of adjusting to their new schedule. She took ibuprofen and went to sleep. She woke at 4 a.m. nauseated. By 6 o'clock she was vomiting. By 8 o'clock Kevin was on the phone with the nurse line because her symptoms were escalating, and she had a 4-month-old she was struggling to hold steady. The nurse asked what other symptoms were present. She mentioned the headache that had started the previous night. The nurse asked if there was any chance of gas exposure. Kevin stopped. He said, "We have a gas stove. We had a repair done last week. The gas company arrived within 40 minutes. The technician found a fitting on the rear burner connection that had not been properly sealed after the previous week's service call. The leak was small. Small enough that no alarm in the house had triggered. Small enough that neither Kevin nor Jada had smelled anything unusual. But large enough, over 3 days, to accumulate. The toxicologist at the hospital told them that Jada's symptoms, the headache, the nausea, the vomiting, were consistent with low-level carbon monoxide exposure over multiple days. From an incomplete combustion source, she was held for observation and recovered fully. She said, "Your infant would have been more vulnerable than you. Infants metabolize CO faster. Smaller body, faster respiratory rate." Kevin looked at the ceiling for a long time. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Storm had been pushing Jada away from the infant. Not because he was a threat to Miles, but because Jada herself was the source, the person carrying the contaminated air in her lungs, her clothing, her breath. He had been trying to create distance between the most compromised person in the house and the most vulnerable one. The body blocking was not aggression. It was triage in a language no one in that house had been trained to read. Kevin called the rescue organization back the next morning and told them they would not be surrendering the dog. He said it once, quickly, without explanation, and ended the call. Jada came home on a Thursday. Storm was in the backyard. Kevin opened the gate and Storm came through it, without drama, walked to where Jada was sitting on the porch steps, and lay down against her feet. Jada put her hand on the back of his neck and he exhaled once, and stayed. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Miles is 18 months now and toddles through every room, with Storm 3 steps behind him like a shadow that occasionally sits on its own feet. Kevin had the gas line inspected by 2 independent technicians after the repair. Both fittings are sealed. He checks the carbon monoxide detectors every month. And when Storm stands up from his bed and looks toward the kitchen with a specific quality of attention that Kevin has learned to recognize, Kevin does not wait. He picks up Miles and he goes outside and he checks. Tomorrow, the story of a Labrador who would not let a grandmother leave her house on a morning that started like every other morning, and the cardiac event that happened 3 hours later.